The night air is thick with smoke, the jungle alive with whispers of dread. Somewhere, a distant explosion shatters the silence, sending tremors through a land already torn apart. Peace was supposed to arrive, but America has refused it. Imagine generals in panic, diplomats scrambling, and soldiers trapped in a war that refuses to end. Every order carries a weight heavier than death itself, every misstep a potential catastrophe. The Paris Peace Accords, meant to halt the fighting, lie abandoned, forgotten, as the conflict escalates beyond anyone's reckoning. Cities crumble, supply lines collapse, and fear spreads faster than fire. Today, we enter a timeline where restraint never came. A Vietnam War spiraling into chaos, brutality, and relentless uncertainty, where every day survived could be the difference between life and annihilation. Before we dive into this dark alternate history, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and leave a comment below sharing which historical what-if you'd like us to explore next. In this timeline, America refuses the Paris Peace Accords. The jungles of Vietnam remain a battleground, rivers clogged with debris, and villages abandoned or burning. There is no calm, no ceasefire, only the endless march of soldiers, the constant threat of ambush, and the weight of fear pressing down on everyone involved. Across the world, political leaders watch nervously. Allies hope for compromise, while enemies smell opportunity. And every radio transmission carries news of destruction. No one can predict how far this war will spread, how many lives it will claim, or which cities will vanish under relentless assault. We follow the unfolding chaos, the decisions, the battles, the terror, and the consequences of defying peace. A war that should have ended continues, darker, deadlier, and more unpredictable than history ever recorded. This is Vietnam as you've never imagined it. The humid air of South Vietnam hangs heavy over Saigon and the Mekong Delta. By 1973, the jungles have become a labyrinth of fear, filled with the sounds of distant gunfire and the constant hum of military helicopters. The Paris Peace Accords were meant to bring an end to this nightmare, a fragile agreement promising a pause to the bloodshed. Diplomats and negotiators from Washington to Hanoi pored over maps and documents, trying to chart a path toward temporary calm. For the United States, the war has stretched beyond imagination. Soldiers are exhausted, supply lines strained, and morale faltering. The nation at home grows weary, protests simmering just beneath the surface, while the government scrambles to maintain control of a conflict no one can fully contain. North Vietnam and the Viet Cong, relentless and patient, have learned to strike unpredictably, blending into the landscape, forcing each American operation to feel like a desperate gamble. The South Vietnamese government clings to power, fragile and divided, struggling with corruption and internal dissent. Every decision could tip the balance, every misstep magnified under the relentless gaze of enemy forces. The world outside watches cautiously. Allies hope for compromise, while rival powers calculate the opportunities that might emerge if peace collapses. Tension simmers like a storm about to break, promising chaos if even one side falters. And yet, beneath these negotiations and fragile truces, a single question hangs in the air. What if America refuses to follow the path toward peace? What if the war, already unbearable, grows darker and more merciless? The conference room in Washington is silent, tense. Papers lie scattered, maps marked with supply lines and troop movements. The Paris Peace Accords, painstakingly negotiated, are on the table, but the decision has already been made. America will refuse. Soldiers in Vietnam hear nothing of the diplomats' discussions at first, but orders begin arriving. Hold positions, advance where possible, strike hard. The fragile hope for ceasefire evaporates like mist over the Mekong at dawn. Leaders in Hanoi and the Viet Cong freeze at the news. Plans meticulously drawn over months must be rewritten in hours. The northern forces brace for an escalation they hadn't fully anticipated, knowing the war has just entered a deadlier chapter. Air raids intensify. Helicopters thunder over villages, dropping supplies for troops and bombs for the enemy, blurring the line between military target and civilian settlement. Fear becomes tangible, thick, suffocating, unavoidable. In Washington, political calculations clash with morality. Advisors debate the consequences, but the president's decision is final. The war continues, and it will be waged without pause or compromise. Each choice echoes through the corridors of power, magnifying tension across the globe. Meanwhile, civilians in Vietnam move like shadows, caught between advancing armies and collapsing infrastructure. Rivers swell, crops are destroyed, and families flee into jungles, unsure if survival is even possible. And as the first weeks of this relentless campaign unfold, one truth becomes terrifyingly clear. The war is no longer just a regional conflict. With peace denied, Vietnam is about to become a crucible of destruction, where every day could mean death, and where the world will soon feel the consequences of America's defiance. Back home, the streets of American cities hum with unease. News of the rejected peace treaty spreads like wildfire, igniting protests, strikes, and a deepening sense of fear. Citizens feel powerless, caught between patriotism and horror at the war their government refuses to end. Factories run at a frantic pace, producing supplies for a war that seems endless. Economists warn of shortages and inflation, yet political leaders push for continued military spending, hoping to maintain control. Every dollar spent on bombs is a dollar taken from a population already stretched thin. Families huddle around radios and televisions, listening to casualty reports that grow longer by the week. Mothers weep for sons sent into jungles they may never return from. Fathers rage silently at a government making decisions in distant offices. Universities erupt in debate and chaos. Students occupy campuses, clashing with police, demanding an end to a war that has claimed thousands of American lives. The youth question the legitimacy of leadership and the morality of choices made behind closed doors. The political elite fracture. Some senators push for immediate withdrawal. Others double down, calling for escalation. The nation is split, trust eroded as partisan lines blur into fear and desperation. Supply chains wobble under pressure. Ports, factories, and logistics networks strain to keep the war effort alive. Gasoline, steel, and food become contentious commodities, driving protests and panic across cities already weary from social unrest. And yet, despite protests, shortages, and a crumbling social fabric, the government persists. The refusal to accept peace fuels chaos abroad and turmoil at home. America has become a nation tethered to a war that refuses to end, and every day brings the risk that it may unravel completely. Across the oceans, capitals stir with alarm. America's refusal to honor the Paris Peace Accords sends shockwaves through embassies, intelligence networks, and alliances. Every transmission, every dispatch carries uncertainty. No one can predict where the next strike will fall or which nation will be drawn in next. Moscow reacts cautiously but urgently. Reports flood Kremlin offices. U.S. troops are still advancing, bombardments intensifying, and the war showing no sign of slowing. The Soviet leadership debates covert support, supply routes, and proxy actions, all while fearing a direct confrontation that could spiral uncontrollably. In Beijing, tension grips the Politburo. The rejection of peace triggers a cascade of calculations. Military deployments along the southern border, intelligence monitoring of American movements, and the constant dread that a single misstep could ignite a regional war with global consequences. All allies in Europe and Asia scramble. Nations that had relied on diplomacy now hastily reinforce defenses, consult intelligence, and reconsider alliances. Governments once confident in global stability are forced to act in ways that could provoke escalation, fearful that hesitation may invite disaster. Trade falters under the strain. Shipping lanes in the Pacific and Indian Oceans become perilous, insurance premiums skyrocket, and global markets wobble as uncertainty spreads. Countries dependent on steady commerce face rising inflation, shortages, and internal unrest, forced to choose between survival and taking sides. Diplomatic channels hum with tension. Envoys, generals, and foreign ministers transmit coded messages, fearing interception, knowing that miscommunication could trigger irreversible consequences. The war in Vietnam no longer seems distant. It has become a pivot point for global strategy and survival. Every missile, every troop movement, every political signal is scrutinized with anxiety. America's rejection of peace transforms a regional conflict into a global chessboard. One wrong move could spark wider war, destabilize economies, and redefine power. The world itself teeters on the edge, holding its breath, unsure which side history will fall. Decades after America rejected the Paris Peace Accords, the world bears the scars of that decision. Southeast Asia remains a patchwork of ruins, burned-out cities, and contested borders. The war never truly ended. It transformed into a slow-burning crisis that generations have learned to survive within. Global power dynamics are fragile. Nations that once relied on diplomacy now operate under the constant threat of conflict spilling into their territories. Alliances are rigid, often enforced by fear rather than trust, and every treaty is scrutinized as if it might unravel at any moment. Military strategy dominates politics. Governments prioritize defense over growth, investing heavily in armies, intelligence, and technology designed for control rather than innovation. The shadow of perpetual conflict shapes national priorities, keeping societies on edge and citizens constantly alert. Trade and economies are unpredictable. Shipping routes remain hazardous, markets fluctuate violently, and wealth is concentrated in regions resilient enough to navigate decades of instability. Nations once dependent on steady commerce face rising inflation, shortages, and internal unrest, forced to choose between survival and taking sides. Populations live in uncertainty. Families remember the war not as history, but as an ongoing threat. Children grow up hearing stories of survival, fear, and the relentless march of armies. Normal life is fragile, measured in days and resources rather than stability and comfort. Technological development has taken a darker path. Innovation focuses on defense, surveillance, and control. Progress exists, but it serves security and dominance, not collaboration or exploration. The world is smarter, faster, and harder, but also more tense and unforgiving. And yet, humanity endures. People adapt, resist, and persist, carving fragile pockets of life amid ruins. A world shaped by unending conflict is unpredictable and harsh, but alive. Each day survived is a small victory, a testament to resilience in a history forever altered. History is fragile. One choice, one refusal to honor peace, can send ripples across continents, decades, and generations. America's decision to reject the Paris Peace Accords left scars far beyond Vietnam, shaping a world in constant tension where conflict never fully subsides. The war, once meant to end, became a cycle of chaos. Cities destroyed, borders unstable, and lives trapped between hope and fear. This is the world that emerged. Governments, economies, and societies all operate under the shadow of uncertainty, every decision haunted by the memory of what might have been. If you found this alternate timeline gripping, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and comment below sharing which historical what-if scenario you'd like us to explore next. Your ideas help us dive into new timelines, unravel mysteries of history, and bring them vividly to life for everyone watching. Every decision in history carries weight. Every refusal, every choice can change the course of the world. America's rejection of peace left a legacy of tension, fear, and survival, but also a story of resilience. And in this world of endless what-ifs, one truth remains. History is never finished, and its consequences are never truly behind us.